Interfund payroll distributions allow a fund to process payroll in one fund and distribute the expenses to other funds. If you're using CenterPoint Accounting or CenterPoint Accounting for Agriculture, funds are companies in your database, but we'll be referring to it as fund today. The payroll process itself is no different. At the time that the pay run posts, distribution journals are created between the funds. In order to do payroll distributions, there is a setup required for some special accounts, and we're going to step through that. You want to go to Setup and Accounts and Account Categories. And the first account that category that we're going to create is an interfund receivable. So we're going to click New, and a name can be Interfund Receivable. This category is going to represent the funds that are due to the fund that's processing the payroll from the other funds that are really getting the expense. You can leave that sequence. The type will be asset, and the class, you can do your lookup, will be current assets, and the subclass is other current assets. If you're using balance sheet groups, you can click that. It will fill that in when this is saved. And we're going to go over to the balance detail. What we need to do is store balance details on the accounts that are in this account category. It'll be maintained for each fund that owes back to the fund that's processing the payroll. So we're going to use associated fund and bring that to the right, and that will tell CenterPoint that any balances going to accounts in this account category are going to be maintained by associated fund. And we'll save that. Now we'll need another account category for the liability side. So we're going to click New again. And this one's going to be called Interfund Liabilities. And we can put a sequence on that. Let's use 2000. And the type is liabilities. And again, the class will be current liabilities, and the subclass other current liabilities. And you can check the box if you're using balance sheet groups. Same thing on the interfund liability. We need to do associated fund in the balance detail. And we'll save that. Now we're done with the account categories. We're going to go to Setup, Accounts, and create accounts in each one of those categories. First, click New, and we're going to call this one Due From. Let's go like this and give it an account number if you're using account numbers. And we'll call it Due From Fund. So this will be the one that will be increasing on the fund that is processing the payroll. The funds are due to them. They will receive an asset. And the type is asset. And the category is that new category we've made called Interfund Receivable. And we don't need any other details here, no sub-accounts, and we'll save that. And now we'll create the liabilities side, and this one will be called Due To. This is going to be the dollars represented to each of the funds that received the expense but didn't process the payroll. And we'll call this Due To Fund. It's a liability, and the category again is the new category we made for interfund liabilities. And we're done with our accounts. We're going to close out of accounts, and there's one more step to the setup. We'll need to go up to Setup, Payroll Details, and go to Interfund Payroll Distributions. We're going to click New, and the payroll fund that you select is the fund that's processing the payroll. So we're going to click New. That will many times be the general fund. And then we get to decide if we want to distribute by department. So based on the details that you're putting in the pay run, this detail is going to manage how the funds get transferred to the other funds by either department or location. We're going to select department. And the due from account will be the asset that we created, due from fund. And the due to will be the liability we created, due to fund. Now we need to go to the distribution detail. This is what's going to tell CenterPoint how to distribute. Here on the left is a list of all the departments. We told it on the general tab that we want to distribute by department. So we're seeing a list of the different departments in this database. And it is defaulting to 100% to the fund that is actually processing the payroll. So the general fund in this case. What we need to do is on any one of these departments that is supposed to go to a different fund, we need to identify what percentage is supposed to go to that. So here are our other funds that are involved. We have a street fund and a water and sewer fund. So in the case of administrative, court, fire, those are all going to stay in the general fund. But let's go down to the street fund, or department, I'm sorry. When we're in the street department, we're paying employees that are working in the street department. We want 100% of that to go to the street department, and none of it is really the responsibility of the general fund. This could be divided as long as you have to have everything add up to 100. But you could have 50% to the general fund and 25 to street and 25 to water if that were the case. But in our example here, anything that goes to street department, we want going 100% to the street fund. And on sanitation, anything that is paid to the employees with the Department of Sanitation, we want 100% to water and sewer fund. So we're going to put in 100 there, and it's giving us an error. We can't go on here because we don't add up to 100. So we need to make that 0. And when we're have pay runs that have sanitation, 100% will go to water and sewer and 0 to street or general. If those are the only ones that involve transferring to a different fund, then you are ready to save. And then we can process a payroll. So we're going to do that next. I'll show you what happens we'll process a payroll real quickly, and we'll see what happens then in our reports. We're going to select processes and payroll and pay employees. And I've started a pay run here in pay employees. I have a few employees, and there is an employee that works in the street department and an employee that has some water and sewer. So we're going to go here, and in this employee, Tom, he is getting paid the earning of water and sewer hourly pay in the Department of Sanitation. This is going to be transferred then to the water and sewer department because it's in the department or fund. It's in the Department of Sanitation, and sanitation, we're telling it to go to the water and sewer. On Floyd, he's getting paid street hourly pay and the Department of Street, and it's going to be then transferred to the street fund. So we're going, there's no different in doing the pay run. You'll do it the same, and the department assignment is what's directing what should get the fund expenses. We're going to go right over to the print checks and go ahead and post and print. And the one thing that is different here is this fund will post interfund payroll distributions. That is indicating that there's some payroll. Let me cancel that. And it did post for us, but that little message is indicating that there was payroll distributions in this particular pay run. Now there are some reports that you can run to see what happened in those distributions. So there's a special folder for interfund payroll. We'll first run this interfund payroll receivables, and it's looking at just this month. That's fine, and we'll preview it. And this is representing the funds that are due to the general fund. So we have some from our street department and some from our water fund department. And we'll close that and go to the interfund payables. And that shows what each one of the other funds that received the expense but didn't process the payroll. Street Fund owns CenterPoint Village General this amount, and Water Fund owes General this amount. So there are several reports here to tell you what happened in that distribution. And here's a breakout of all the individual expenses and the journals that got created. So we have the due from, these are the journals that backed out the expense to the CenterPoint Village General and put it into the receivable accounts. And the due to are where the water fund sewer is getting this expense, the street fund is getting this expense, and increase their liability. The payroll distribution does not do the transfers of moving then the money from these other funds back to the general fund. Those you'll want to do in a general journal. So if we were to do that, we can go to the general journal, and let's say that the street fund is paying back the general fund. And you could put in here, you might have a transfer type name. I don't know if we do. We'll just go ahead and make a new one. And you might want a special name that's just called transfers if you don't already. And the account that we're going to do is the due to. We're working with the street fund, so we want to pick up the liability that was increased for them. And we're going to need to turn on, if you don't already have an associated fund as a column, you can right click, add remove columns, and check that box for associated fund. We're going to want to make sure and select the associated fund here so that that is addressed when it's posted and it's going to the correct balance detail on due to fund. So the department was the street, and the amount we can get from one of our reports of our payroll distribution for the street was $947.64, and that will be a debit to decrease that liability. I have to go back and get that amount, $947.64. Okay, and we're going to go over to the associated fund. And in associated fund, we need to select the fund that they owe. So the funds are due to CenterPoint General Fund, so we'll select that on the general fund. And then the offset to this is going to be the street fund checking, is where the funds are coming out of to pay back the general fund, and that would be the same amount. And we can click difference down here, that'll fill in our amount, and we would be ready to save this transaction. Let's go ahead and save that. And then on the other side of the general fund receiving the money, and we can put our transfer, or you could use your different funds here too as a name would be fine. In this case, we're going to want to pick the due from account and the department, which was street. We're working with the ones from street. And in the due from, it's going to be a credit to this asset. So the same amount, $947.51, and it will then decrease the asset of that due from asset and offset it again with our checking account for the general fund checking. And this will be street, and we need the associated fund on the due from fund back to street, because that's what it was being maintained for under on the CenterPoint Village General. For the due from fund, the balance represented street fund. So we want to indicate the street fund when you're bringing it into the general. And when we did the one to pay the liability out of street, it was due to CenterPoint Village General. So we selected the general fund in the associated fund. And we can click difference here, and it's ready to save, and our interfund transfer has been completed.